let's talk about the book of Romans. You know, people have called it the most important letter ever written. And honestly, for good reason. It's kind of like the constitution of the Christian faith. If you really want to get to the heart of it all, Romans is where you go. So, let's jump right in.
Okay, let's be real for a second. Have you ever tried to read Romans and just felt completely lost? It can feel like you're standing at the bottom of this huge, intimidating mountain of theology. It's dense, it's deep, and you might not know where to even begin. Well, guess what? We're about to hand you the map. This is going to be your simple guide to conquering that mountain.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big picture. Then we'll get into the who, where, and when. You know, the backstory. We'll set the scene, talk about what Romans says about Jesus, connect all the dots, and then bam! We'll finish with a super simple roadmap to the whole thing.
All right, first up, the big picture. What is Romans really all about? I mean, if you only get one thing from this entire letter, what should it be? Let's find out.
And here it is, the main event, the righteousness of God. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a really heavy theological term. But stick with me, because it's actually the best news you could ever hear. It basically means that getting right with God has nothing to do with how good we are. Instead, God gives us His perfect goodness, His righteousness, as a totally free gift. It's not about our performance, it's all about His grace through Jesus. And that right there is the gospel in a nutshell.
But you know what's so cool? Romans isn't just some abstract theology lecture. Paul had some very real down-to-earth goals. For one, he was introducing his understanding of the gospel to a church he'd never even met. He was also playing peacemaker between Jewish and non-Jewish Christians who were not seeing eye to eye. And, get this, he was also looking for support. He hoped they'd back his next big mission trip to Spain. So yeah, it's practical.
Okay, let's switch gears for a second and get our bearings. Who wrote this thing? Who was it for? And when did it all go down?
So the author? That's the Apostle Paul. There's really no debate on that one. And to get Romans, you kind of have to get Paul. This guy was a brilliant Pharisee. He knew Jewish law inside and out. And, well, he used to persecute the church. But then he had this incredible, life-altering encounter with Jesus, and it completely flipped his world upside down. That powerful experience with God's grace is what just pours out of every page of this letter. And who was he writing to? The Christians in Rome. But this wasn't just any church. For starters, Paul hadn't founded it. It was a real melting pot of Jewish and non-Jewish believers. And with that mix came, well, tension. They were arguing about stuff like food laws and holy days. Paul is writing to say, hey, let's get back to the one thing that unites us all, the gospel.
Now this timeline right here is super important for understanding the drama. See that first date, AD 49? The Roman emperor kicked all Jewish people out of the city. So the Christian church there suddenly became almost completely non-Jewish. A few years later, when the Jewish Christians were finally allowed to return, they came back to a church that felt, well, foreign to them. Paul writes his letter around AD 57, dropping it right into the middle of this cultural pressure cooker.
All right, so we've got the historical background. Now let's talk about the letter itself. What kind of writing is this exactly?
Yeah, so this is not your average, hope you're doing well kind of letter. Most letters back then were short, like a quick text message. Romans, it's more like a masterfully written legal argument or a deep philosophical essay, but it's still dressed up like a personal letter. Paul isn't just checking in, he's laying out a rock-solid case, piece by piece.
And one of the coolest ways he builds his case is this little technique he uses all the time. He'll make a big statement, and then he'll immediately ask the question he knows you're thinking. It's like he anticipates your objections. He'll say something huge, like, God's grace covers all our sin. And then he'll immediately ask, so, should we just sin more so we can get more grace? And his answer is always a powerful, no way. It feels less like a lecture and more like a live conversation.
So when you boil it all down, all the theology, the history, the practical advice, where does it all point? To one person. Let's look at what Romans teaches us about Jesus.
I mean, Romans gives us this amazing high-definition picture of Jesus. It makes it crystal clear that he's both fully God and fully human. His death is called a propitiation, which is just a way of saying his sacrifice completely paid our debt for sin. And because of that, his perfect record gets credited to our account when we have faith. That's justification. He's also called the new Adam, the one whose perfect obedience undoes all the damage the first Adam caused. And finally, his example is the blueprint for how we're all supposed to live together.
Okay, that's all great, but so what? Why does a nearly 2,000-year-old letter matter to you and me today? How does it all connect?
Well, for starters, if you read Romans, you'll see Paul quoting the Old Testament all the time. And he's not just sprinkling in verses to sound smart. He's showing that the good news about Jesus isn't some random plan B. No, it's the grand finale that the entire Old Testament was pointing towards. It's like he's taking all the puzzle pieces from Genesis to Malachi and snapping them together to reveal this beautiful, finished picture of Jesus.
And that's why this book is so vital today. It gives us the clearest, most logical explanation of the Christian faith you'll find anywhere. It shows us how people from completely different cultures can be united in Christ. It even gives us practical wisdom on our relationship with the government. And maybe most importantly, it shows us that the Christian life isn't about following a list of rules. It's about living a new life, completely transformed by gratitude for the incredible grace we've been shown.
Okay, we've covered the big ideas. Now for the final piece, the part you've been waiting for. Here is that simple, high-level map you can use to navigate the book for yourself.
Seriously, take a screenshot of this, write it down, whatever you need to do. Paul's logic is just flawless. He starts in chapters 1 to 3 by defining the problem. We all have a sin problem. Then chapters 3 to 5, he reveals God's breathtaking solution, righteousness through faith. Then chapters 6 to 8 describe the result, a totally new life in Christ. He then zooms out in chapters 9 to 11 to talk about the scope of God's plan. And finally, chapters 12 to 16 get super practical, spelling out the practice, how to actually live out this new gospel life. Problem, solution, result, scope, practice. It's just brilliant.
So you see, Romans isn't just a list of theological facts. It's a journey. It masterfully guides you from the depths of our problem to the incredible heights of God's solution in Jesus, and then shows you how to walk in that amazing new reality. We started by saying Romans can feel like a mountain, but you've got the map now. You know the main trails, you understand the terrain, and you've seen a preview of the breathtaking view from the summit. Trust me, it is absolutely worth the climb. The only question left is, are you ready to take that first step?